Hi, my name is Kriya, and today I will be presenting my analysis of study techniques and productivity methods for my AP presentation. So for this presentation, I'm first going to be going over the background, so then I'm going to talk about my methodology, the results of my study, an analysis of those results, and then my overall conclusion. So first I want to talk about my personal experience. So raise your hand if you've ever felt really distracted or you felt like you were having like a mind block when you were trying to focus or get some work done. Yeah, pretty much everybody. Recently I was diagnosed with ADHD and I might have autism. So this is something that I kind of deal with on a day-to-day. I've done my own research into it, but I haven't really been able to find initially any information that I found really benefited me. So I was like, I don't know how this will apply to other people. So when I went and did some background research, I found a bunch of different studies that basically talked about different methods of studying, different methods of instruction that affected students in different ways. So one of the studies that I researched was titled The Effects of Class Scheduling and Student Achievement on State Testing. And basically what it was like, it was a dissertation that basically noted a significant lack of research on the impact of various class schedules on student academic performance. And it highlighted a need for studies that explore how different scheduling formats affect rest and recovery for these students. Another study that I looked at was titled The Effects of Duration on Strain Reactions in Students, and it basically analyzed undergrad med students and looked at their study duration and analyzed how when they had more gaps in between their study periods, they were actually able to do better on their exams, and they also had better sleep cycles, less stress, and overall just did better in general. Another study that I found really helpful, it was titled Strategies for Coping with Time-Related and Productivity Challenges in College Students with Learning Disorders and ADHD. This is by the National Center for Biotech Information. It basically analyzed strategies that were used by college students with learning disabilities and ADHD to manage time and productivity. It was very impactful for this presentation specifically because a lot of the studies that I looked at were more general and broad for like groups of students in a class. So not everybody in a class obviously will have the same learning disorders, but this specifically focused on those students. Another study that I actually looked at was titled The Comparison of Rest Break Interventions During a Mentally Demanding Task. It analyzed how students in a lecture hall actually were able to process information and retain what they were learning. They basically did this study by looking at students who were taking breaks in between the lectures, so when the professors would teach, they would stop for a period of time, versus students who were just sitting through an entire lecture and trying to learn for that entire chunk. And they found that for the students in the group who had the rest breaks, they actually not only had a higher accuracy rate when they answered questions about the topic, but they had a higher task efficiency rate, meaning that they were able to process more information in less time and get more things done, which was actually very cool. So the gap that I basically found was that although these studies talk about certain methods and time periods that students can use to kind of be more productive, it didn't talk about individual students, and it didn't talk about how it would be applicable to them in their day-to-day lives. So say that they want to study on their own, or they're just like going about their day trying to be productive on like a general basis. It didn't talk much about that. It was more of like a group setting situation. So this led me to my question of how can study techniques be utilized to benefit the unique needs of an individual? So basically my limitations for this topic is that there is also a lack of response. I'm going to get into that later. So there's a lack of response, at least for my study that I wanted to do, because not a lot of people want to study on their own free time. They don't want to participate in these sort of, at least like they don't want to participate in these sort of studies because it's kind of just like extra time out of their day. There's also a vast amount of methods that can be tested. So if you go online, even if you just like go in your day-to-day and you talk to people about this, everybody has their own way of studying. Everybody has their own way of being productive. and there are so many different ones to choose from. So that was another limitation. And then there's also possible bias because when it comes to like this sort of study, the people who participate are usually people who already have everything under control and they can take on an extra task to do. I wouldn't expect somebody who's already struggling with their day-to-day to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this experiment and it requires me to study extra material. So that was another limitation. So my methodology for my study was that I was going to conduct open-ended surveys on students within the school through a multi-step process. So how this would work is I had 4 different surveys, and I started with my initial survey, which basically just asked them general questions about their current GPA, if they wanted to share it, their current study techniques, if they were happy with their schedule, and what like a day-to-day just looked like for them. So like what their average screen time was, just general information so that I could gauge how they were already doing. With this information, what I then did, I created like sort of a schedule or like a timeline for them to split up the study. So I gave them material on biology and on history. So each student had to do both, but I would basically be like, okay, so on this day you're gonna do 30 minutes of biology, 20 minutes of history, and then kind of split it up differently for each student. So obviously some people have more time in their day, some people have like sports after school, some people don't do anything. Like it's sort of like, it varied for the student. So the main purpose of this was so that I could find the ideal way for each student to kind of just like maximize the time that they already had and just like be more productive during that period of time. That was for my initial survey. Then I asked a 1-question survey, which just asked them what study technique did each student want to use. So there were 3 techniques that I actually decided to choose. They were like the most reputed ones and the ones that I got the most information on. So I decided that using these would be incredible. So first it was the Feynman technique, which is basically like asking somebody to explain the topic like you're explaining it to a child. That is basically just a method of retention that people use a lot. The second one is the Leitner system, which you might be familiar with active recall and flashcards, which is literally just like quickly viewing information and then like trying to remember that in your brain so that you can move forward. And the last one is more of a time-related study technique, which is the Pomodoro method, which basically involves studying for a period of time and doing a task and then taking a short break to go right back into that task for like another period of time. So for the Pomodoro method, I just want to clarify, I asked the students to do like a 30-minute study and then a 5-minute rest. I didn't want to do anything longer than a 5-minute rest because I figured since this study was so spread out, they didn't need to analyze as much information in like over like a long period of time. So it was like it wasn't necessary. Then we have the midpoint check-in survey. So this was conducted around 2 weeks into the experiment. And it was basically the longest survey because it asked the students about their, basically how well they've been doing. So like how much of the assigned material they've gotten done. If they had changed any study techniques, I basically had a questionnaire for them to input that and be like, I started using this or I stopped using this one. Are you following the schedule? How effective are the study techniques? Do you feel like you're retaining the information well? Do you need any guidance or like any help in terms of like managing the schedule? And how is your experience so far? And then lastly, it was my post-study feedback survey, which basically just asked them how effective overall did you find your combination of study techniques? Did you find anything valuable? What was your experience? And what challenges did you face? So basically the survey results, I got a total of 4 respondents, which I know is a small number, but once again, this is one of my limitations where I wasn't really able to get people to want to participate in the study. But these lovely respondents actually helped me a lot. There were 2 juniors, a sophomore and a senior. There were no freshmen, which I kind of predicted because once again, I feel like these groups of students are more likely to participate in these studies because they already have some sort of a grasp of what's going on in their day-to-day. So I'm going to go into the survey results. So basically, most people chose the Leitner system, or they chose a combination of the Leitner system with the other techniques. That was just something that I found pretty interesting. The average GPA of these students was like the average GPA of these students was like a 3.775, which again, what I expected because I felt like people who wanted to participate in the study already had like a grasp on their day-to-day. All the respondents had 4 hours or more of screen time, and got anything between 1 and 6 hours of sleep at night. Nobody got 7 or more hours. So I also found that interesting because a major thing that these respondents told me was that although either they were already being productive, they just found that they were very tired going into their days, and after they were getting done with all their work, they just felt very stressed out all the time. So that was a concern that they had. The current study techniques, it was kind of spread out. So some people used Khan Academy, some people took notes and used YouTube videos, etc., etc. And yeah, so once again, the most common complaint from this study was that people were either forgetting to do it or they were struggling to follow a routine. Basically, I would give them like the schedule. Some of the students told me over time that I'm forgetting to study, I'm forgetting to sit down and just analyze the material. That was like a main issue. But however, all the students found the study techniques to be effective on like a 4 to 5 out of 5 kind of scale. And they felt like they were retaining the information well. So that was good. There were some key trends. There was overall positive feedback. Once again, most people found these techniques helpful. And most people chose a combination of these techniques, which allowed for some flexibility in their studying. But there was some difficulty with staying committed to the study because people were finding it difficult to sit like every day and follow like a certain routine that was given to them. So my conclusion from the study is that there's a possible benefit of utilizing study techniques in a routine outlined as per the personality of an individual. So obviously I cannot give very conclusive results, but at the same time, overall, since people did pretty well on the material that they were assessed on, and they thought that it was helpful, I can conclude that there can be a benefit, that there's a possible benefit of utilizing these techniques. Some implications were that there's clear expectations, at least for what's to be, what should be analyzed moving forward. So I feel like in like the field of academia, a lot of people try to just come up with techniques that are more applicable for a broad audience, like kind of quick fixes. But I feel like we need to start asking for more specific techniques that can be applicable to individual students that can be uniquely utilized. There's also a possibility of better productivity for these students who are previously struggling, because once they find something that works for them and they stick with it, it'll definitely be able to help reduce stress and just increase the amount of work that they can get done during a certain period of time. And once again, it provides for easier time management. So if you're kind of struggling with like a bigger schedule or like having more things to do, if you find a study technique that works for you, you can obviously cut down the amount of time you're struggling to sit down and try to analyze information. And this is my work citing.
Okay. What was the most important source of information you found while conducting your research for your background and understanding of the topic? And why was it important to your research process?
My most important research was the source that was basically by the National Center for Biotech Information, called Strategies for Coping with Time-Related and Productivity Challenges. I found it to be the most useful because it analyzed specifically how students with a varied, like neurodiverse sort of perspective on at least like their day-to-day, how these study techniques impacted them specifically. So like I said before, usually when we talk about like the field of academia, it's more for a broad audience and it's for students in general. So I felt like this study being focused on like a specific group really helped me a lot, and it wanted me to inquire more into how that was, I guess, useful.
If you could have one ideal audience member to present here for your presentation that you would feel would benefit most from listening to the presentation, who would that be and why? It could be someone by name, a job title, a profession, even if you don't know someone specific.
I think it would be my sister, Cushy. I feel like this is something that she personally, I know, like in her day to day, has been struggling with. She actually was also like 2 days ago diagnosed with ADHD and mild autism. So she's been like really going back and forth, being like stressed about trying to find ways for her to stay productive, especially with like her current life being like a junior in college, and she has a job now and everything. So this is something I feel like would genuinely benefit her and other people who are in her spot like right now. But yeah.
Which part of the research process did you find the most difficult? Was this something you were anticipating would be difficult?
I think the most difficult part was getting respondents, and I did anticipate this. I just didn't know how I was going to fix it at first. I really went back and forth trying to figure out how am I going to get people to respond to the survey. So at first, I kind of just had the surveys posted on like a Google Classroom, but eventually I had to start going up to people and being like, hey, are you willing to participate in my study? And then when I was like face to face with them, they didn't really want to say no, so I was like, yeah, sure. Like, I'll be honest. So yeah, I think that was the most difficult part. But yeah.
Any other questions?